It's December 2025, Christmas just passed, and under the tree there was this, a Steam Deck OLED. So stop for a second and be honest with yourself. If you unwrapped this today, would you actually be happy? Because that reaction you just felt, that tiny pause before excitement, that's exactly why this video exists. Not because the Steam Deck is bad, not because it's suddenly stopped working, but because this is the moment where devices get exposed. Every piece of tech eventually reaches this phase. The hype's gone, the launch videos are a few years old, and whatever you're holding in your hands has to stand its own, without excitement, without context, without excuses. And before we go further, if you're into handheld gaming, long-term takes, and actually living with these devices instead of just chasing launches, well, you might want to stick around, because this isn't 2022 anymore. The Steam Deck OLED
This is Steam Deck.
launched at the end of 2023. So by Christmas 2025, we're already more than 2 years in, heading into 2026. This is effectively a late cycle device, which raises a very real question. Does the Steam Deck still hold up going into 2026? Or are we quietly at the end of its lifeline? Because on paper, the doubts are easy. The hardware hasn't changed in years, Valve stopped selling the cheaper LCD model, so the entry point is higher. There is a lot of rumors, but there is no Steam Deck 2 announcements. And every few months, another handheld shows up claiming that it is the one that is going to finally replace the Steam Deck. And historically, this is the point where products start to fade out. And honestly, that's exactly what I expected as well. But then, well, you turn it on. And this is where the narrative starts to crack, because you've got the OLED screen that still looks genuinely great. Deep blacks, strong contrast, smooth motion. Nothing about it feels dated when you're actually playing this. The ergonomics, they still feel excellent. This is actually one of the most comfortable handhelds you can hold for long sessions. And that matters way more than the raw specs once your honeymoon phase is over. And then there's SteamOS, which is built around this machine by the company that creates this machine. It's perfectly integrated. It's updated constantly. It suspends and resumes perfectly. And that still works instantly. I admit that might sound boring, but that's only until you've actually used other handhelds where that function doesn't work very well. Here, you're actually back in the game in seconds, and that console feeling, well, it's still here, and it's still excellent. And by the way, this is also where accessories start to matter, especially if you're actually using the Steam Deck long term. And these two were sent over by JSOX, JSAUX, you might have heard of them. This is their mod case for the Steam Deck, which adds a lot of protection and grip without getting in the way of using the device. It's excellent because buttons, vents and controls, well, they still feel perfect. And it really protects your Steam Deck. And this here is the fan cooler. It clips on the back cleanly and helps you keep temperatures more consistent during longer and heavier sessions. Less heat, fewer noise spikes, more stable performance over time. None of this is about turning the Steam Deck into something it isn't. It's actually about making an experience that already works more comfortable and more reliable long term. If you want to check them out, I'll leave links to both of them down below. But now back to the big question, because none of this matters if the competition has completely caught up. So let's talk about the real alternatives going into 2026, because you've got devices like the ROG Xbox LAX, the Legion Go S, that's the one with Steam as well, and you've got things like the MSI Claw. They're faster, they benchmark better, but they're also, well, at least the first and the last, Windows handhelds, which still means more setup, more friction, more time managing things instead of playing. And then there's Nintendo, and well, they exist in a completely different ecosystem with their Switch 2. And then you've got high-end niche handhelds that actually are very expensive, they're not always that consistent, and they're not really aimed at people who just want to play games. And so here is the uncomfortable truth. The Steam Deck isn't surviving because it is the most powerful handheld. It isn't surviving because it wins benchmarks, and it isn't surviving because it's chasing the newest hardware every year. It's surviving because nothing else has fully replaced what it actually is. It still is the most complete, least frustrating, and most integrated way to play your Steam library on a handheld. The software, the controls, the ergonomics, the suspend and resume behavior, everything works together instead of fighting you. Other devices might be faster, they might look better on a spec sheet, but they also may ask more of you, more setup, more tweaking, more patience, more money. The Steam Deck just lets you play. And once you look at it that way, the whole conversation shifts, because the question stops being, is it exciting? It becomes, does it still do its job better than most of the other alternatives? And for a lot of people, the answer to that is still yes. So getting this at Christmas 2025 and carrying it into 2026, if you're chasing specs, benchmarks, whatever comes next, well, this probably won't excite you that much anymore. But if you care about comfort, stability, and actually playing games without friction, well, the Steam Deck still holds up really well. And it might not be exciting anymore, but it is mature, it's comfortable, it's refined, and above all, it's proven. And in 2026, that might be the version of the Steam Deck that makes the most sense. And if you enjoyed this kind of honest, long-term perspective, not hype, not first impressions, well, you would do a lot worse than considering to subscribe. In any case, thanks very much for watching, and I'll be seeing you in the next one. Bye bye.